In my last video, I told you that the Canon EOS R1, Canon's flagship sports and fast action camera, will be announced on July the 17th. I am now able to confirm that the next big Canon announcement is going to take place on July the 17th, and that's coming from multiple known and trusted sources. I was able to validate that information early this morning from not just one, but several sources stating that July 17th is the date for the announcement for the Canon EOS R1. But I wasn't able to just get information about the date. I also got additional specifications and who these cameras are aimed at. So let's get to that right now. Canon announcing the EOS R1 at the July 17th event isn't really a big surprise, given recent teaser videos for the development announcement and then this recent tweet. Several publications from Canon Rumors to this site have also indicated that the EOS R1 and the R5 Mark II will be announced sometime in July. And along with the Canon EOS R1, my source also said that we will be getting another major camera announcement. Now, some of you have asked me just recently, well, will that be the R7 Mark II? And, well, I've heard nothing about the R7 Mark II or the R6 Mark III. This really shouldn't be a surprise. You've probably already guessed it already. And yes, I know, Mark, you're chomping at the bit too. The other camera to be announced alongside the Canon EOS R1 is the R5 Mark II. And it's not completely... We've seen this before, going back to 2020, where Canon released the R5, the Mark I, along with the Canon EOS R6, the Mark I. So to see the R5 Mark II and the R1 announced at the same event, both cameras are aimed at photographers, and we'll talk about who exactly when we start to cover the specifications. But we are going to get two big camera announcements with the EOS R1 and the R5 Mark II. It is confirmed now that that's going to be held on July the 17th. The only thing we don't know at this point, well, the exact time. So is it going to be a 10 a.m. event by Canon USA, or will it be a little bit later in the day? If we look to 2020, we saw Canon USA release the R5 and the R6. I would like to see Canon USA also release the R1 and the R5 Mark II at 10 a.m. because that just works really well with me. These late night broadcasts, well, if you saw the video about the 200 to 800, I was kind of nodding off towards the end. So anyhow, so that's just my personal preference. We don't have the exact time yet, but as soon as I know that, I'll let you know. Again, July 17th, confirmed from multiple sources. And we also have the R5 Mark II coming as well. So who is the R1 aimed at and who is the R5 Mark II aimed at? Well, what I was told is, and this really shouldn't be a surprise, the R1 is aimed at sports and fast action photographers, but the whole capability set and the value derived from this camera, it's focused on photographers. This whole, if you've been looking for a photo specific or photo only camera, I would say the R1 is going to be the closest camera that's going to deliver that experience. It's aimed at getting you that shot before anybody else, landing you that shot on the cover, giving you a much higher hit rate than anybody else. Whereas the R5 Mark II, and I've said this before, I sense that the R5 Mark II is more of the master of everything, the jack of all trades. And while Canon Rumors said this many, many years ago, some 2 years ago, I think somehow the wires got crossed and it wasn't the R1 that they were talking about, but the R5 Mark II, because based on everything I'm hearing, this camera is supposed to be the master of everything, at least in Canon's ecosystem when it comes to both photo and stills. And what my source told me is that when it comes to the R5 Mark II, it's going to be as equally adept and designed to function not just as a photo camera, but as a video camera. And this backs up what a previous source of mine had said about the R5 Mark II, that if you're undecided whether to get the Canon EOS R5 or the R5C, you will no longer have any doubts. So when will each camera ship? Well, the Canon EOS R1, let's go ahead and start with that camera. If you recall, a previous source of mine had said that the Canon EOS R1, we won't have that camera in our hands until the end of summer. So that was one source, and that was the only source at the time. I now have multiple sources, multiple known and trusted sources telling me that's correct. It won't be until the end of summer. Not only will it not be until the end of summer, but it's going to be in November. So November shipping for the Canon EOS R1 for you and I. Now, there will be some photographers that will have this camera in their hands. They'll be shooting at the Olympics, and there's some discussion as to whether these will be pre-production units or production units, but yeah, you and I, we won't have this camera in our hands until November. So multiple known sources at this point, at least 3 of them telling us November. But the news is a little bit better for the Canon EOS R5 Mark II. We're not going to have to wait until November, October, or even, well, we are going to have to wait until September. So unfortunately, some indications have indicated that we would have the camera shipping in August, and with the July announcement, that's certainly something I was looking forward to. But according to this source, the Canon EOS R5 Mark II won't be shipping until September. No mention if it's going to be early September, middle September, late September, but there you have it. July the 17th announcement for both cameras. September shipment for the R5 Mark II, November shipment for the R1. So what about specifications? Well, Canon rumors did get it correct about the frame rate. According to my source, not only will the Canon EOS R5 Mark II be capable of shooting at 30 frames per second, but it will be able to do that. And again, this is 45 megapixels here, 30 frames per second, and that will be RAW. Now the Canon EOS R1 can do a little bit better and do 40 frames per second continuous RAW. Now I'm a little bit surprised here because with half the resolution, you would expect it to be able to shoot a little bit, well, at a higher resolution. Now the R6 Mark II, for example, can shoot 40 frames per second and RAW at 24 megapixels. So I wonder about this one specification. Could this be potentially wrong? And it's potentially it could be. However, there's one thing that the R6 Mark III, no matter how good it can shoot at 40 frames per second in JPEG, the R1 is going to be able to do a whole lot better. It's going to have most likely a new image processor. It's going to have a new design sensor from the ground up, capable of many more capabilities in terms of performance and speed as well. So I'm a little curious about that 40 frames per second. Again, it does back up other information we've seen about the Canon EOS R1 in terms of its continuous shooting speed. It never really mentioned RAW, and we had other specifications indicating that this camera could shoot considerably faster. But again, we didn't have any specs validating whether it was JPEG, HEIF, or RAW. This time, now I'm telling you that it can do 40 frames per second RAW according to my source, but it doesn't mean to say that this is the top frame rate. It could go faster, and I wouldn't be surprised if it does, depending on, well, look at the Canon EOS R3, for example. It can do, what, 195 frames per second, but that is only in JPEG, and it does have some other limitations. If it can do 40 frames per second and the autofocus can function in all its glory, as Canon USA said in their press release, that it's going to have an AI-enhanced autofocus that can not only lock onto the person's eyes, but if that person happens to have a ball, so you're covering the NBA, football, soccer, or anything like that, we have a lot of people chasing that person with the ball, it'll realize this is the person with the ball, this is the person I need to lock onto, and allow you to snap the shot accordingly. And that's a really big deal. So these specifications I'm giving you, they're limited context because we only have a certain specific number of specifications. And as far as frame rates, that's all I have. Now, in terms of the Canon EOS R5, well, I talked about several patent applications that talk about internal venting, that it had heat pipes that didn't interfere with the weather sealing in any way whatsoever. And I can confirm that the what do we call it here? The thermal architecture of the Canon EOS R5 Mark II, and I have to be careful how I say this because I don't want to risk getting my source in trouble, but it's going to be significantly better than the Canon EOS R1. And you're going to be able to, well, let's just say that heat buildup is not going to get in the way of your recording. Now, the source didn't mention anything about recording modes, or not recording modes, recording limitations in recording modes. But from what I've heard in the past, there is no arbitrary 30-minute record limit. And based on what we see with the Canon EOS R1, this camera in all climates, whether here in Canada, where 10 months of the year overheating has never been an issue, but a lot of people buying in the tropics had issues at least until firmware 1.6 came out, at which point the camera is able to do a whole lot better. So much better thermal architecture. I can't confirm whether it does have those heat pipes or not, but I think we'll notice that the camera's going to look a little bit different. That's all I'm going to say about that. Now, have I left anything out here? So we've talked about the date, we've talked about the time, and let's see, anything else? Oh yes, pricing. The pricing of the R1 and the R5 Mark II isn't going to be that much different than the predecessor. So the 1DX Mark III was $64.99 and the Canon EOS R5 was $38.99. Now I had another source coming out telling me that the R1 would be $64.99 and the R5 Mark II would be $39.99, so $100 more than the the predecessor. This really isn't very surprising. We saw the R6 Mark the R6 Mark II come out for the exact same price as the Mark I some 2.5 years earlier. So we're now at the 4-year mark. Hold on, let me just check this. Oh, do I have more information here? Sorry about that. Things are happening fast and furious. I've received so much information this morning about these two cameras. So pricing very similar. When I told you about $64.99 in a previous video, I did say that was a Canon internal pricing. So this source is telling us that the pricing is going to be very similar. I don't know if it's going to be $64.99, $65.99, $63.99, but just understand at this point you're not going to get any sticker shocks from either of these two cameras. So again, this is coming from multiple known sources. So the July 17th event, that one you can take that one to the bank. Unless Canon does a last-minute change, we are getting the announcement on July the 17th. The Canon EOS R1 is confirmed from multiple known sources. The Canon EOS R5 Mark II, this is the first time I've had a source come forward and say that that is the camera that's going to be announced alongside the Canon EOS R1. Now, no mention on lenses, and there's no mention of any other cameras. So that's really good news. We got some additional specifications. We got some validation in terms of pricing. So I'm pretty excited by this information. It's 4 o'clock in the morning. It's now almost 5 o'clock in the morning. And I feel wide awake because this is the first jolt of actual validated information I've gotten from multiple sources. And it's pretty rare that this will happen. You get some information, you reach out to sources, and they respond almost immediately, being able to confirm certain parts of that information about that story. So I am pretty excited by this. I expect other information to fall fast and furious. And I wouldn't be surprised to see if other sources come out with additional information, such as Canon rumors on additional specifications for either of these two cameras, as well as possible lenses. And you might be wondering why I have the pre-order links already in the description down below, as well as on the screen here. Well, that's because when it comes to Adorama and B&H, they already have a page up for the Canon EOS R1. It's a notify me only at this point. But the R5 Mark II, they don't have a page, so I have smart pre-order links for those down below. And what they're designed to do is go ahead and bookmark these, copy them, put them in your browser, because what's going to happen on the day of announcement on July the 17th is we're going to have a lot of demand for these cameras, especially the R5 Mark II. And if you really want to have these cameras in your hand and you want to have them, let's say, in early November rather than sometime in 2025, and whoever joked about 2025, well, when it's coming for the R1, that's a very real possibility. So you want to go ahead and copy down these links, put them, bookmark them in your browser, and that will ensure that you get these cameras before anybody else. These links will save you anywhere from 5 to 35 seconds. The smart pre-order links, what they're going to do is show you not just the Canon EOS R5 Mark II, but every kit package available that Canon offers, as well as Adorama and B&H offers. And it's going to take you directly to the website. You're not going to have to put in any codes. It's not going to cost you anything extra, although I will get a small commission back. And I thank you to everybody who's been a regular and loyal viewer of this channel, and anybody that does use my pre-order links for the R1 and the R5 Mark II, a big thank you. I am going to be doing a live stream. I'm just going to wait for confirmation on the exact time and time zone, and once I have that information, I'll also let you know. I'll tweet it out, I'll put out a video, and I'll schedule my live stream. And what my whole purpose for this upcoming event is to get people who are professional sports photographers, nature photographers, fast action photographers, as well as people that have been shooting with the R5 for many years, because I want to get their viewpoint of what they think of these cameras. And we'll probably start the live stream either somewhere between 60 and 90 minutes ahead of the actual Canon scheduled announcement. and then we'll cover Canon's announcement live. And of course, we'll let you know as soon as those pre-order links are live. It won't be too long now, but this video's gone on long enough. I've got to edit this and get it out before my workday starts. A big thanks to you for watching at home, for watching till the end of this video. We're in the final stretch now, folks. We're getting more specific leaked information about specific dates. We're getting specific specifications, and it's coming from multiple known and trusted sources, and that's really the exciting thing. And from what we're hearing from Canon rumors, everything is lining up. You remember when we had all those contradicting information coming out from different sources from 2022, 2023, and here in 2024? Have you noticed how everything is kind of congealing and lining up along the same sort of information, building upon each other? That's the really good news. Anyhow, thank you so much for tuning in and watching, and we'll see each other again soon.